This is our final candidate for today, so we want to make sure you get a full measure of time as well. And we want to thank you so much. It's Nancy Kane, yes, correct? Yes, and you live in, you're competing for the 6th Judicial District. I want to just say, by way of explanation, my name is Kathy Nolan, and I have the great privilege of chairing the Education Committee. My usual sister here is Deborah Glick, is higher ed. For quite a few years we've served together, but for the first time ever, she's been taken a little sick, so we've been saying hi to her on the camera, but she's well represented by our ranking minority member on higher ed, Chad Lupinacci, is here, as well as the ranking member on education, Pete Lopez, and Dean Murray from Long Island, Ed Rao from Long Island. So even though we've had some other members who were here earlier who have gone out to a meeting, and maybe some will come back. So we always tell our candidates, don't feel offended if someone gets in and walks in or sits down and walks out. It's part of the hectic schedule of the legislature. I also want to point out these are live streamed, and then they're archived somewhere, I guess, in a different format. So you'll be on camera somewhere for forever if your family wants to watch it. It's another thing we've done last year and this year that I do think has, though it's fewer people actually come to the hearings, that's always an interesting thing, I always mention that, but many more people do watch them. So it does give, we get comments and things in from people, so that's good. But the main reason we have these is for us in the legislature, we in the legislature, to have an opportunity to have just an informal dialogue. We're not swearing you in, you're not an expert witness at a hearing. We just want to hear your thoughts on why you would want to be a regent. We have your, and really all our people give us, we always get amazingly impressive resumes. I see that you have a background in dance education, for example, so it's always so wonderful. It's a learning experience for me, and we appreciate it. And just be open to some of the questions. There is no litmus test. There are many hot button issues in education. You don't have to be pro or anti any particular thing. When we appoint the 17 regents who serve for a 5-year term without compensation, we try to get a wide variety of people, not just wide variety of regions and wide variety of perhaps backgrounds in their educational backgrounds, but also in their thought processes, so that we can have a truer debate for the children of the state of New York and all of us as lifelong learners. So, welcome.
Thank you very much. Yes, hello everyone. I would like to thank you for letting me come here and share my story, a bit of my story, and tell you how that relates to work I would hope to do on the Board of Regents. Statistically and sociologically, I should not be sitting in this chair right now. I grew up in Elmira Heights in a blue-collar community full of immigrants from Poland, Ukraine, Italy, Ireland. I was the 6th of 7 children being raised by a single mother working as a waitress. When I was a freshman in our high school, the school budget was not passed, and we had to live under an austerity budget. That really made an impression on me, and it has made it so that I have never once in my entire life voted no on a school budget. But the thing is that the teachers in our school did not let that austerity budget diminish the things that some people consider frills. Things like arts education, physical education, they kept them going, and it's because of their dedication that I was able to have a career in the arts. I graduated as valedictorian of my high school. I had the highest average in the history of the school, a weighted average of 100.51. But there was no money for me to go to college. There was no way. I tried for every scholarship I could get, and even at that time it was under Graham Rudman, and I had to enter college full-time while I was in high school just to be able to qualify for Social Security educational benefits. While I was at Purdue University, there was a time when I was selling my plasma 3 times a week to buy groceries, and I didn't have enough money one month to buy a bus pass to get to school. And a caring advisor pulled me aside, and she gave me $20, and she said, "This is under one condition. Just pay it forward when you get a chance." And that's primarily the reason I'm here, is to pay it forward. After doing a certificate of proficiency in French at Purdue University, I went to the University of Colorado, and I majored in dance, getting a BFA, a performing arts degree, but it was a conservatory program within a liberal arts program, so I also was graduated Phi Beta Kappa. I took my dancing to Europe and did my first master's in London at the Laban Center, writing my thesis in France because I had had an excellent high school French teacher, Bonnie Campbell, who had made it possible for me to have that experience, to go to France and live there and communicate and do research. When I came back to the United States, I was working as a teaching fellow at New York University. And once again, even though I had a scholarship, I didn't have a lot of money. I sold my eggs 3 times to be able to, again, pay for rent, groceries, those kinds of things. My degree was in multimedia and performing arts. I was probably the first person ever to do a dance DVD. This was back before DVDs were even in existence. So dance and technology, I was one of the pioneers. At SUNY Cortland, where I was working at the Performing Arts Department, I came to realize that some of my students were suffering from being bullied. They were LGBT students, and there was a serious problem on campus. I fought it with everything that I had and found allies within the campus, and the UUP, the Union of United University Professors, or United University Professions, gave me the Fayez Samuel Award for Courageous Service because of my dedication to my students. While I was there, I got a kinesiology degree, which is a natural outgrowth of a dance degree. I also became the president of the National Dance Association, so I've got national leadership in arts advocacy experience, and also had to work a lot with committees, teamwork, all kinds of things. Being a dancer has not just meant, as one person told me, learning to kick your leg higher. It's a study of sociology, culture, anthropology, music, arts in general, and in my case, technology. I've had 3 decades of higher ed experience, a little bit more actually. I still perform, I still teach, and the skills that I use in research and leadership continue to serve me as I am the director of Twin Tiers Honor Flight. It's a nonprofit organization that takes veterans to Washington, D.C. to visit their war memorials. I have time now to listen, to travel, hopefully with my 6th judicial representatives like Barbara Lifton and Donna Lupardo, to find out more about what people in our district want from the Board of Regents, want from their education system. I am perfectly willing to compromise, but I am also perfectly willing to speak out when there's something I feel passionately about. So I am more of a listener than a talker, but I am not afraid to make my views known. I hope on the Board of Regents I would love to work with the Committee on Higher Education, and would also hope to work with the Culture Committee, and maybe on the committee that reviews credentials from foreign institutions.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Did you want to? I thought you were finished and say so. If you want another word, don't feel sorry. I jumped.
It's okay. I just had a personal note also. I've got a niece who did the International Baccalaureate, was offered a scholarship at Ithaca College, and she saw the sticker price and got scared and decided college wasn't for her after all that work. And last I knew, she was working as a motel housekeeper. So the issues of higher education, affordability, and access are very near and dear to my heart. So while I've had my struggles, they're not the worst struggles. I've had great privileges and opportunities too. So I'm hoping that I can be of service on the board.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Questions?
Yes, and thank you, Nancy, for joining us. I've been trying to ask questions consistently of all our candidates. So the first question I would have for you, we've had a number of groups approach me and others across the state to look at the Regents curriculum and ask if we should be doing more to allow students to have multiple pathways, but one that would allow them to graduate from high school and have skills and abilities to enter the workforce if they so chose. And I'm just wondering what your reaction would be to that.
Well, I did the Regents diploma when I was in high school, but I understand now that we've got a couple of pathways. We have alternative means to get to graduation and to get through graduation in New York State in a variety of ways. I also am very much in favor of all of the BOCES programs and vocational education, apprenticeships, and any means that people can find to get to where they want to be in terms of their education and their life goals.
Thank you. My second question, quickly, again, I represent much of the Northern Catskills, a little bit north and east of you, and we struggle with pervasive poverty. And the question I would have for you, do you see a role for the Regents helping provide support, wraparound services, if you would, to educators to help struggling students be focused in the classroom? So issues of poverty, violence, drug abuse, do you see a role for the Regents to try to provide supports to our schools and educators and administrators?
Yes, absolutely. If we're not advocates, what are we doing here? I understand from the latest budget proposals that such incentives have been offered. What concerns me greatly is the continuation of the same formula that we've been using to figure out how much aid to give to each district. And I know it's worked in some places, it's worked not so well in other places, and I think that's something that we can continue to look at and hopefully reassess moving forward, because if we don't, we haven't got a prayer.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairwoman.
We can just go right down the...
Good afternoon. I just have a question also on higher ed, because I know you mentioned it towards the end. It's something that, you know, we are trying to make college more affordable, more accessible. Do you have any ideas coming up? I know you spoke about the story with your niece, but maybe conversations you've had with incoming students. Any thoughts that you have on the subject?
Yes. It breaks my heart when I meet with students in higher ed, and the most basic things, they can't afford supplies for their dance classes, or they can't afford the textbook. And I'm the type of person, I will get them the supplies, I'll get them a textbook. But I remember being at a place in my undergraduate years, I had no money to go to college that year, and I said to financial aid, what can I do? They said, well, we can't do anything for you, sorry. And I remember my boyfriend selling all of his most prized comic books to put me through school that year. What can we do at this level? We have got, besides the budget initiatives that have been put forth, we of course know that Governor Cuomo has proposed some free college, you know, with restrictions, and I believe that's a wonderful idea. If I had been living in this time instead of back when I did, I wouldn't have had to sell my body parts to get through school.
Hi, thank you for coming. I wanted to first compliment you on when you're as I do many times, telling people to add the A to STEM to make it STEAM, and because of the importance of the arts. But you strike me as one that is creative and such, but in this time, it seems we're putting more emphasis on high-stakes testing and scores and things of that nature. What are your thoughts on the fact that we're putting so much emphasis on the high-stakes testing?
It's hurting the students. I've had students come to me when I was teaching in private dance studios, days before the test, so stressed, they couldn't sleep last night. Oh, I can't remember my dance steps. I just can't think about anything but the test. When I was growing up, we had tests. We had the Iowa tests, but they weren't things that we would obsess over. It was simply a measure to find out where we were, where we stood as individuals and as schools and as states against everybody else. We need to have those measures, but we don't need to do it the way that we've done it so far, and we've got to continue to find a better way so that people don't feel like the only option that they have is to opt out.
Mr. Ra?
Thank you. Just, I guess, one thing, and this is partially a comment of something that I think you might be a great person to work on, should you be put on the board, but also if you have any thoughts on it. So one of the things with, the arts, and Mr. Lopez was talking about, multiple pathways. Obviously, it varies from district to district what of these classes are actually available to, to a given student. There are districts that are able to have great extra science classes and arts classes and all of that, and then there are districts that aren't, and sometimes can maybe get some of those services from, from a local BOCES, but they're still dealing with then at the administrative level, counting pennies to decide whether it makes sense to send a kid there. So, and down on in Nassau County, where my district is, we had this STEM institute that closed last year, unfortunately, through our BOCES, and then there's a school for the arts that basically was kept afloat by the generosity of Billy Joel, made a big donation to save it. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on just that system as a whole, and how maybe we could work to provide more direct support so that those services are available to all students, because it truly is an equity issue. And if a student could have a pathway to a diploma, but if they don't have the opportunity to take the classes that they're going to need, that pathway is really not there for them.
Yes, we have standards. Actually, one of my very dearest friends wrote the national standards for dance education, and I worked on the National Dance Association, which had created the standards for United States standards for dance education. The standards are written up, but in most cases we can't afford to implement them fully. We've got schools in Yonkers can't even afford to have nurses and counselors on staff, let alone provide for PE teachers. There are students who get PE once every 5 or 6 weeks. So I understand there are very real economic realities, but there are also priorities. And if this is an area that will help motivate students to come to class, to work on other things, because they know, okay, at the end of the day, I get to go to band practice, or I know we're going to have the show, that will also help with student retention. So I think that there are creative ways to work. I know that I've been somebody who's been in many, many arts residencies. So working with local arts councils, I've gotten into the schools, and I've worked with a step dance team down in the Rockland area. I've worked with pre-K students. I've worked with the after-school programs, all of these through the arts councils. So hopefully there are ways that we can continue to do those things, but also when you look at the overall picture, something like a dance class requires very little other than a boombox and somebody qualified to lead the classes. It's not like it's a huge expense with lots of equipment. And I think that it's just, maybe it's not on the radar of some people that this is a way that we can bring the arts into schools.
Thank you.
I want to thank you. I got a little, sometimes in running the meeting, I lose focus a little. I apologize for that. I think one of the questions we would have of someone with your background would be to look at not just arts education, but physical education in our schools. We talked a little bit earlier how some of the New York City schools don't do instrument instruction, though I should have clarified that most children now in the city under Frenia have this access to a keyboard. So it's something. It's not the kind of material that they have in other parts of the state. But I know that in physical education, not just in the city, but I can tell you in other parts of the state as well, there's been a real walking away from, for example, having a licensed phys ed teacher at an elementary school and things like that. So is that something that you have any expertise in? I don't know exactly what I know you've worked as a dance instructor, but could there be and I realize they're separate, but that might be a logical next step to look at? In your own district, for example, are you familiar with, in the 6th Judicial District, whether there is a lack of phys ed facilities or any kind of a lacking of, proper instruction in these things?
We have facilities. The teaching positions, I think, have been cut back to make way for other things. Didn't you work on physical education legislation yourself?
Yeah, and we had a veto, and we had one bill that's been vetoed, so we have to go back to the well again and rework the concept. Thank you for looking it up and referencing it, yes.
Yeah. My second master's degree is in kinesiology, which is exercise science. So I work now, I'm actually teaching future physical education instructors.
I see, good.
So I would absolutely be comfortable with that. And the organization that I used to be the National Dance Association president, that was part of AFERD, the American Alliance for Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance. And I learned a great deal from my colleagues and going to conventions and reading their works.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we're finishing up, yes? I want to thank you for offering yourself in service to the people of our state, and particularly our students, our young people, and thanks so much for coming forward. We will obviously be in touch with you again, and all the candidates will get some type of a opportunity, I think, we'll give you a letter, and then there'll be other conversations as we go forward. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all.